Hollywood has a serious bad guy problem, but today we're going to try to fix that. See, every good story needs a great villain. Whether it's Darth Vader, the Joker, or Hannibal Lecter, Hollywood's most iconic films all have equally iconic bad guys. However, amazing antagonists such as these seem to have become more and more rare as time goes on. But why is that? And how can we recapture the cinematic wonder of the films we grew up on? The short answer is just follow the recipe for making the ultimate antagonist. And if you don't know the recipe, stick around. We've got 3 of the best villains in superhero cinema here to teach you all about it. Let's start with secret ingredient number 1. It's been said that every villain is the hero of their own story, and while that might sound like a passive-aggressive card your Mima sends when you forget to visit, it really just means that your antagonist needs to have compelling motivations and goals of their own. Sure, we should be rooting for the main character to succeed, but if there isn't at least a small part of us that understands and sympathizes with the villain, we're not going to be as invested when they battle the hero. Take for example, Thanos from Avengers Infinity War. I'm not an edgy 13-year-old, so I don't actually think that Thanos was right, but the movie dedicates so much of its runtime to exploring his behavior and psychology that I fully understand why it is he wants to snap away half the universe. As a result, he feels just as desperate to succeed in his mission as the Avengers are to make sure that he doesn't. Now, this doesn't mean you need 3 hours in order to make us empathize with the villain. The filmmakers endear us to him in a number of clever ways, each of which can be utilized no matter the length of your story. First, he tells us parts of his own backstory. This can be a bit on the nose, but incredibly effective when used sparingly. When Thanos encounters Doctor Strange on Titan, he explains that this was once his home, and that after watching it be ravaged by overpopulation, he swore to never let this happen again. This is Thanos' core wound. It explains how a person like him could wind up wanting to do something so terrible. Secondly, many of the characters throughout the piece have history with Thanos and are able to tell the Avengers and the audience all about him. Not only is this a subtler form of exposition, but the Russo brothers elevate it further by having different characters talk about him in different ways. Ebony Maw is his loyal disciple. He speaks of Thanos with reverence, and when he introduces Thanos, it strikes fear into the heart of the audience. Likewise, the fear in Bruce's voice when he says, "Thanos is coming," speaks to just how big of a threat the Mad Titan truly is. Finally, Gamora and Nebula, who he abducted as children, speak of him with an intimate familiarity that simultaneously hints at the ample trauma they underwent because of him. In a dark way, this humanizes Thanos, but also shows just how much cruelty he's capable of. Each character and their relationship to Thanos adds layers to him as a villain and keeps him from feeling one-dimensional. The antagonist is arguably the second most important piece of any story, so they should be a compelling character in their own right. The more the audience cares about the villain, the more interested they will be in the overall story. I'm not saying you can't have a mustache-twirling bad guy, but if you do, they still need to be given as much depth as the other characters in the narrative. Something to keep in mind is that a villain is nothing without a hero to oppose. Because of this, a great antagonist needs to function as a dark reflection of the main character. In The Dark Knight, Batman is a symbol of hope and order in Gotham. He fights to make the city a better place. His goal is to protect others, and he adheres to a strict moral code. Conversely, the Joker is an agent of chaos. He has no moral code, and he wants to see Gotham descend into madness. More than any other Batman villain, the Joker symbolizes what Bruce Wayne fears most. The Clown Prince and his senseless acts of violence harken back to Joe Chill murdering Thomas and Martha Wayne, which is what set Bruce down the path to become a vigilante. A failure to overcome the Joker represents a larger failure in Batman's overall mission. In terms of narrative mechanics, Christopher Nolan's interpretation of Joker perfectly exploits each and every one of Batman's weaknesses. He gives Batman false information to take away the agency of choice, and he turns the city of Gotham on Batman, preventing the Dark Knight from being a symbol of hope. Both Batman and Joker are fighting for the soul of Gotham, but Joker wants to see it succumb to its worst tendencies, whereas Batman wants it to live up to its true potential. Their yin and yang relationship makes it feel like they were destined to do battle. The audience can't help but be enraptured as they wait to see who comes out victorious. If a villain represents everything your hero opposes, there's immediately conflict built into your story, which ramps up the tension and keeps the viewer much more engaged. If, for instance, cinema's favorite underdog, Rocky Balboa, wasn't matched up against the heavyweight champion, his attempt to go the distance wouldn't mean nearly as much. The character of Rocky is only inspirational because his opponent has all the training and resources he doesn't. Speaking of Rocky, our last villain is Apollo Creed's very own son. Portrayed by the, as my mother would say, very handsome man that is Michael B. Jordan, Eric Killmonger is among the best antagonists in the MCU, and my personal favorite. With how culturally significant Black Panther is, it's easy to overlook just how good of a story it is on a technical level alone. Very few movies explore theme as effectively as it does, and a large part of this comes down to just how well Killmonger is utilized. You see, the final ingredient when it comes to making the ultimate antagonist is change. All the best bad guys are the catalyst and inspiration for change in the main character. Great protagonists need to have character arcs, and great antagonists are how you achieve this. In Black Panther, T'Challa undergoes a deeply complex arc, in which he re-examines what it means to be king, questions how to serve both his people and the outside world, and is forced to pay for the sins of his father. At the center of all of this is Eric Killmonger. T'Challa's estranged cousin believes that Wakanda has sat idle for far too long, basking in its wealth and excess while others like them suffer around the world. Killmonger confronts T'Challa and those in power, forcing them to re-examine who they've become while utterly destroying the status quo. Our protagonist cannot ignore the thematic questions at the heart of the film, because the antagonist will not allow him to. Even though Killmonger is technically defeated in the end, he succeeds in forcing T'Challa to change his ways. Though less extreme than Killmonger's methods would have been, T'Challa commits to bringing Wakanda out of isolation, and is determined to aid the people that Killmonger believed he was empowering. Villains don't have to be right, but they shouldn't be completely wrong either. It's so much more intriguing to see two forces oppose one another when picking sides isn't black and white. The whole purpose of storytelling is to examine the human experience, and the human experience is more complicated than good versus evil. The antagonist should represent the problem at the heart of the story and its main character. Wakanda's isolation and prosperity comes at the cost of subjugation and discrimination beyond their borders. Killmonger is the cost of their complacency. He is a trial T'Challa must undergo that will prove whether or not the Black Panther is worthy of being a king. He motivates the plot, the character arcs, and the theme of the story. This is the mark of a great antagonist. Every element in a story should have significance, and the more significance you can give to each element, the more poetic your story becomes. And that is the remedy for Hollywood's bad guy problem. The main character of a story can only be a hero if the obstacles they overcome are great enough. A hero in isolation feels like an excuse to sell merchandise, but the conflict between a hero and their perfect antagonist, now that is cinema at its finest. I'm Dylan, and this has been The Writer's Block.